You said you had heard. This system has to make changes, does it not?
Absolutely.
And you do recognize that through the electoral process, a third of this board changed as of January of this year, correct?
Correct.
So we have 3 totally new people, 1/3 of that board that has come online since January. Correct.
Correct.
Have you met with any of those 3 at this point?
All 3.
Okay. You find them to be sincere, earnest individuals who want to do a good job, from what you could tell?
Yes.
And you know that 2 of the members came on board 2 years ago, correct?
Correct.
And at that time, things were a bit rocky as they came in. That be a fair statement?
Fair statement.
So they themselves didn't exactly walk into the best situation, did they?
Like I said, it's been 10 years.
But a majority of that board today are people that have only recently gotten there, and 3 of them have only gotten there in the last 2 months.
Correct.
Now, you met with Dr. Thurman. I'm sorry, I'm elevating our superintendent. Forgive me, Dr. Forgive me if I call you Mr. Elgart. Well, you probably aren't mad at me. I just gave you a PhD. Excuse me. You met with Mr. Thurman.
It's not accredited, though. The PhD's not accredited.
You met with...
I want to appeal that.
Dr. Elgart, you met with Mr. Thurman a few days ago, correct?
Tuesday.
And the primary problem, and you use this term, the primary problem has been governance and leadership, correct?
Over the last 10 years, yes.
Yes. You do recognize that Mr. Thurman has had a career of dealing with governance and leadership.
As he stated to me on Tuesday, yes.
And you're aware of that, are you not?
Prior to Tuesday, no.
Okay.
Did not know Mr. Right.
Did you not know who he was, sir?
I knew his name, but I didn't know.
Okay. But in looking at his background, it has been governance processes and leadership.
Yes.
And I suspect you could see from meeting with him that he does have serious leadership qualities. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And it's going to take serious leadership qualities to move this system forward, is it not?
Correct.
Do you believe that he deserves a chance to apply that governance and leadership talent? And I realize he is not up for removal here, but do you believe he deserves the chance to do that? To try to address these governance and leadership issues that have been raised by your
I
report?
believe he was hired to do so.
Okay. And did you find him to be earnest and sincere in his desire to do that?
Yes, as I would expect.
It would be fair to say that he is not a mild-mannered and unmotivated individual, from what you saw. And he is prepared to dive headlong and persevere through it.
He stated his commitment.
And you have no reason to doubt that, I assume.
No, not that one.
Now, the 3 new board members that came on in January, you are not in any way trying to paint them with any problems with probation as much as they weren't even there when the probation came about.
No, but as I stated earlier, the concern is there's an operating environment that has existed for 10 years. As I stated to these 3 board members, if they continue to support that operating environment, they will go down the same pathway as previous boards and previous superintendents. In 10 years, we're on our 5th superintendent. various changes in the board, but the operating environment of this system has remained the same. So at some point, that has to change. Like I said, 4 previous superintendents came in with the same hope, the same commitment, the same sincerity, as did previous board members. So at some point, this has to change.
Okay? And these 3 new members have been elected by the public,
Correct?
and they have told you they're committed to that change, have they not?
Yes, as I've heard from previous board members.
Okay? But whoever is there has to make that change, regardless of how they get there.
Absolutely. It is a performance issue that must be addressed.
Okay. And the public on these 3 members put them there, and they say they're committed to making that change.
Yes.
All right. We got 2 other members who've only been there 2 years. And they have to participate in this, correct? To make these changes.
All the board has to. It's a matter of the Board of Education is responsible.
All right? But those 2 board members from 2 years ago and the 3 new board members are in and of themselves by number a majority of the existing board, are they not? If they pull together, they are, correct?
But the 2 are part of the board which we evaluate in the investigation.
Correct, but they'd only been there since 2011, correct?
But they are identified as clearly part of the problem right now.
They came in as a minority to the whole, correct? I mean, just numerically, they're a minority to the whole.
Yes, but they're part of a Board of Education that is deemed ineffective for our evaluation process.
And the other 4 members who are there have to also pitch in, do they not? If this is going to happen.
Yes.
Okay? Now, SACS has processes, correct?
Correct.
And under those processes, you've explained to this board that the DeKalb County Board has a year, but there's an interim report that will have to take place, correct?
Correct, by May 31st.
And you've given them till December 31st to complete the resolution of the problems that you presented and to bring them up to par, correct?
Correct.
And in May, you expect a review team to come back in, take a look, and determine whether real progress is being made, correct?
In May, it's to determine are they moving in the right direction, and have they put in place a plan that is specifically aligned and targeted for the areas of concern. We don't expect significant progress by May, mainly because that's why we give them a year, but we better see direction that is headed in that area. Part of the challenge here is, even by, you use the word complete, by December, they have to make substantive progress. We are, even after December, going to look for sustained improvement and sustained performance. And that will go way beyond December. This is an accreditation issue that we believe is going to take a number of years to fully satisfy and to restore the system to a system focused on student performance and effective governance.
Okay. But under the process that you've got, they have hurdles they must climb over and be above by the certain dates of May 31st and more particularly December 31st.
In this process, approximately every 6 months, they will have a defined review by our organization, monitoring very closely the activities. And even after December 31st, about every 6 months, they will be under this monitoring process.
Okay. And regardless of who's on board, that's going to be true, is it not?
Correct.
Okay. Now, under your processes that you put in place, your organization's sense of fair play of saying, we've drawn a line, you're on probation, you have until these dates to complete certain things, to show us that you are progressing or making corrective action in the right way and in the right order. You're moving forward. And they've got to be at a certain level come the end of the year. And they've got to be at another place May 31st.
Correct.
Now, when you met the other day with Mr. Thurman, he told you of some of the progress that is being made, did he not?
Told me of some of the actions that have been taken to date. I'm not sure I want to use the word, wouldn't define it as progress, just actions.
Okay. But he told you what they were doing,
Yes.
and he has jumped into it both feet. Would that be a fair statement from what you can see?
Yes.
All right. Now, do you understand that the board has also changed leadership?
Which they do in,
Not necessarily, they can re-elect the chair, the same chair.
true, but they go through an election process annually based on
Correct.
their own policies.
But they changed, they didn't just elect, they changed leadership, did they not?
After several attempts, yes.
Okay. But you said you weren't looking for 9-0, or you were aware it was 7-0. I mean 7-2.
That's fine.
Okay, that's fine, right? Okay. I mean, you could keep electing the same chair year after year, right? But they made the decision to change chairmanship.
Yes, they finally did.
And they made the decision to change vice chairmanship. And the two people that they chose absolutely were not in the system as board members when it was placed on probation.
True. The vice chair position was vacant because they could not be elected. The person who was in the vice chair was not re-elected either. So they had to fill that vacancy.
But neither of the two that have been elected chair and vice chair on this board when it was placed on probation.
Correct.
So they did not turn to another member who had been on the board when it was placed on probation. Their collective wisdom was, let's go with totally new blood, correct? And would that not give you some reason for hope that they want to put in place real corrective actions and improvement?
Possibly, but it also brings concern because it is unusual for two people who have never served on the Board of Education to now be in charge in a chair and vice chair role on that same Board of Education. People haven't gone through training. Now they're the head of the governing body, the third largest system in this state, and one of the top systems in this country as far as size. It's not an easy task. We have now the concern that they elected two individuals without training and experience to carry out those roles.
Well, I can appreciate your concerns, but these folks are not without some background experience of their own, are they?
It's a matter of judgment. I'm not.
Well, we elect people to high offices in this country who've never even held office before. True?
True, and it's rare that a person elected to office then becomes a ranking chair of a committee in a state or federal structure. They usually have to ascend to committee chairmanships over time because they gather experience as a legislator.
You know, like Abraham Lincoln, who was elected president and had only served one term in Congress many years before, who turned out to be maybe our greatest president. I mean, we elect people to office, and they elect board chairs.
I'm not disputing our democratic process. This is a performance issue. All I stated was a concern that now there is a challenge here, there's a risk. If you place two people in leadership roles, they have no experience serving on a Board of Education. And it is a risk. They could turn out to be great. Okay? However, it doesn't remove the fact that we have a professional concern. That they have now elected two people without the requisite experience to serve in those roles. So only time will tell, and their ability to demonstrate the capacity to do this job at a high level, time will tell. We'll see.
Do those new members that have been elected deserve the opportunity to carry forward to do that?
We all do.
Thank you. Now, clearly the DeKalb system has had its issues, but you do recognize these changes in leadership.
Recent,
Do
yes.
you think, Mr. Thurman, the new board members, the new chair and vice chair deserve the opportunity to correct and lead this group in correcting those problems?
Isn't that the ultimate question? I bet.
No, because none of those three are up for removal.
Well, but I don't see the relevance to the question.
Well, I think it's three-stage questions to it.
Do you believe that Mr. Thurman and the new chair and the new vice chair, and the three new members deserve the chance to lead this entire group to corrective action to resolution of these problems.
Ms. Hackemeyer, I believe you can designate it as an expert, and I believe that's a perfect question for him to express his opinion, so I'll overrule the objection.
As I stated to Mr. Thurman the other day, and I'll restate here, the challenge ahead and the complexity of that challenge cannot be solved by one, two, or a few people. It is far deeper. It extends over a 10-year period. Do they have a right? They're new to this and they're not under this hearing. They're not subject to this hearing? Absolutely. But they alone will not be able to change 10 years of inefficiencies, 10 years of ineffective governance, and 10 years of decline in this system. It is going to take far greater than that. It's going to take a performance of an entire governing body and leadership team of staff at all levels of this county to change 10 years. It didn't get created overnight, and it is not going to get solved overnight.
By anybody who's in those roles, correct?
Yes.
And these folks have been selected to lead this effort. Do you have any reason? No, sorry. Now, if this body recommends removal, the new members could elect a new board chair. You elect board chair at any time, can you not?
I'd have to look at their policies. Yeah, that's a local policy, and it's directed through local policy.
But wouldn't we also be getting new people if these folks were removed? Now wouldn't we have a board made up of people who most likely have never served on a Board of Education before?
Possibly, but possibly not.
And if we did, we'd have a whole new board, wouldn't we? We'd have no one of any school board experience if that turns out to be the case.
That's not necessarily true. Could they?
If they're all new and never served on a board before, it would be, wouldn't it?
If that's the only case, but if they could also
Hold on,
place
what's your objection, Ms. Hackemeyer?
I believe counsel is arguing with the witness and not letting him finish his answer before he.
I'm not trying to cut him off.
I just wasn't, I
That's okay.
let him finish his answer, and then
All right.
I understand.
If there is removal of the 6 board members in question, it would be really important in the decision-making process that 6 people who fill those roles in a short term, until I'm not an expert on the process as far as electing permanent replacements. But as we've seen in other settings across this country, it would be really important to put people of experience to be able to shore up this system during a period of rapid change. And rapid change could catapult this system in a positive direction if the right people are placed on that board with experience to lead it through a transition to a more permanent governance state and a more permanent leadership state. So if I were asked my professional advice, if you identify people who would come to that not as novices, but would come to that with expertise to be able to guide during this period of transition.
You said these problems go back a decade. And it's not going to change overnight. But the majority of this board wasn't there when most of those things happened. I mean, that's true.
True.
Now, you said if progress is made, if they demonstrate improvement toward meeting these goals, they can move up. Correct?
Yes.
And that is the purpose of the May evaluation, is to see if they're on track to being able to make those improvements. Correct?
Correct.
And when May comes, there's a great deal about 3 weeks before that the school system's going to have to submit to sides, correct?
Correct.
And then a team is going to come in, taking the information they've gotten, and they're going to take a look to see if they're on track. Is that a fair statement? And once we get to that point, all of us will know more about whether real progress is being made. Won't we?
Yes, you should.
So this new leadership and new guidance on board by both the superintendent and this new leadership on board, we will all be in a better position to assess whether it is working when we get to your review in May, correct?
It is our hope that we will get it.
Well, if they have not made real progress and are not where they're supposed to be, you will so report, correct?
Correct?
And if they have made real progress and are where they're supposed to be in moving forward in corrective actions, you will also so report, correct?
Correct.
And we're standing here in the middle of February, and in a matter of a few months, you will have an opportunity to go behind those closed doors, take a look, and see if that culture is being rectified to a more positive direction, correct?
We would hope to see early indication that it is changing, it is moving in the right direction.
And your systems have a sense of, I assume what y'all assess to be fair timing, gives this system that time frame, correct?
Correct.
I mean, you didn't put May 31st on there because you thought we can jam them, that's too quick. You thought that was the appropriate time for the next review.
We do this consistently throughout all these processes, no matter whether the school district is in Georgia, or it's in Arizona, or it's in Brazil. And there is a policy and procedure that we apply to these matters. We're very consistent.
Can you tell this body who the team was that came in and reviewed the school system in December? Or, I guess, in the fall?
You test my memory. I can tell you the letter visit. I don't believe I brought the names of all the team members with me. You may be able to text Jennifer and ask her to send it, but right now I can tell you the letter visit.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. Why is that not reflected in your report?
The system knows who it is. They know who the teams are, just as the system knows they generated this. They generate the schedule and the people we interview. It's not unknown. The system knows exactly, because we ask the system, you tell us who we need to interview when we come on site. They provided us with a lengthy amount of information we requested prior to. The system knows exactly who's on the team. There's no secret there, so it's...
Well, obviously they have to show up, so when they show up, I'm assuming they're not coming back.
But they knew even before then. They know exactly who serves on these review teams. That is not hidden in any way.
But this document is something that's shared with the public, correct?
But the document isn't just the product of a review team members. Because their staff behind the scenes, we asked them for a lengthy list of evidence prior to. I mean, there's like 12 different areas in which staff are reviewing all of that. This is a work product of a lot more than just the interview team. The interview team plays a role in this, but it is not the sole determinant of this process. And the interviews are based on what the system wanted to provide for us for additional evidence of their ability to address the standards. This is the system's structure. So they know who was interviewed, when they were interviewed, and they know exactly who conducted the interviews.
Okay. But my point is, the public doesn't know who the review team itself was, correct?
They could ask the system, they're a public entity.
Well, I'm just curious why that's not in your report.
Because it's not the report of the, it just hasn't been in there. I mean, there's no reason, but the system has the right to disclose what it chooses to disclose. And if somebody wanted to make a request for information from them as a public entity, I'm assuming they'd have to produce it.
Now, do you agree with me that the nature of your report primarily focuses on governance and leadership?
And resource and support system as well.
But the majority of it is on governance and leadership.
Those two standards, but governance and leadership has a responsibility over the resources.
Correct. Those two are tied together.
Yes.
Okay. Now, some of the things in your report deal with things that are administrative in nature, correct? Things that are not necessarily under the board.
Correct.
Okay. So, some of the problems that were identified in this report really are not necessarily directed to the board, and I'm not saying the majority of them. I know the majority of them are directed to the board. But some of these are administrative functions that the board itself is not supposed to be involved in.
And what the report indicates is we have evidence that they are involved. If there's the role and responsibility and the relationship between the administration and the board does not support their policies. And there's conflicting actions taken by staff and board members that don't follow policy. And it creates a very inefficient and ineffective system.
That's where you get the micromanagement,
Yes.
correct? And if the board is out of that, then many of these things that this report addresses fall squarely upon the administration of that school system.
If there was no evidence of board micromanaging, would there still be some evidence? I mean, it's hard to separate the two. You know, you've got to if the board's not micromanaging, would the administration still do what they're doing? Or if the administration is doing what they're doing, would the board not micromanage? I mean, they're co-joined. And it's very complicated, complex. That's why I said this isn't easily rectified. You get patterns of behavior and how you operate that extend over 10 years. And people keep doing it.
The micromanagement issues are not uncommon to local school boards trying to do that, the superintendent.
Certainly, it's not uncommon, but it is uncommon when it is debilitating.
Okay.
I mean, everybody, if we have isolated cases, and we see this all the time, we see, struggles and challenges and boards operating. But when it's sustained and over a period of time, as it is in DeKalb Board, and it has the impact that it's had, then it's different than just, well, you're going to see something.
Do you recognize, I presume you do, that the nature of your report leaves those of us who read it blind as who we can rely upon for having presented certain information?
The nature of the report is it's a report from us to the school system. It's not written for the public. And the school system knows exactly who we interviewed, when we interviewed. The school system provided us with all this information that's listed here. They identified who we were to interview. They know who conducted the interviews. They know the process. It's a report from us to the system. There's nothing hidden in that exchange. That exchange is completely transparent. Now, we don't write the reports for the public. It's not our responsibility. And we are writing the report for this system to understand and act on, and we meet with the system and offer them the opportunity where they have questions to give them further information so that they are clear about the conclusions that are reached and why they were reached. This is an engagement between us and the system, not us and the public.
I understand that, but that document is going to be publicly reviewed most of the time. It's supposed to be put out. It's not a public document, right? School system can't hide it.
Under Georgia law, they can't. We're private entity.
Okay. And my question is, this board sitting here today, reading that report, cannot tell who we attribute certain claims to, who made that claim, that this happened or that happened, correct?
In reaching the conclusions that we reach, why is that even important? That X person said what? Isn't it the conclusions of the report that they're not meeting standards and there's a pattern of ineffective governance? And the school system had a responsibility and opportunity to demonstrate effective governance. It doesn't really matter at this point who said what. The fact is, board members themselves verified that they're struggling. There were 9 board members interviewed, 36 staff, including principals, and 6 representatives from the community. And they painted this picture. Then we reviewed all correspondence since May 1st, 2012 between board members and staff, all board policies, all board meetings, agendas, minutes, videos, all copies of the forensic audit, contracts with professional firms, each audit conducted in the last 6 years, financial statement, the most current, legal fees since 2007, 2008, staff and responsibilities in the Department of HR, hiring policies. I mean, this is documented evidence. And then we asked these people to help us understand it, where we had questions. Some of it we didn't have questions because it was clear. Findings in a forensic audit, videos of board meetings, email exchanges between board members, we didn't need any interpretation, it was clear. But they presented this group as evidence, not us.
Who presents that? Because you keep saying the school system. Does that come primarily from the superintendent?
You have to ask them who was responsible. We assume the superintendent board and key staff were involved in identification of this because they had to organize the schedule based on their availability, and the board members were in this list. So that's something you'll have to ask them.
I'm still trying to go to this fundamental principle of what I want to ask you. These nice folks here are being asked to make a recommendation by the board, and you have put them on probation, and I'm not even beginning to argue that it wasn't justified to put them on probation. But for them to read this report, and I've read it, there are places that is sort of like group innuendo, group suggestion, or someone said this or someone said that. As far as the reliability of those statements, since you don't know who they came from, how do you give that reliability in those kinds of instances?
Objection. Your Honor, I think this has been asked and answered, and I think it's starting to get to the point of harassment.
I don't know that he's asked that question. I do think it's a little compound from Ms. Wilson if you want to break it down. And Dr. Elgart, I would ask if you could, I'd appreciate you maybe listening to Mr. Wilson's questions and kind of focus on his question. If we can move a little faster.
Okay. Let me see if I can do a little bit. If one reads the report, do you agree that it has hearsay?
No.
There's no hearsay?
No.
So when you attribute something that we heard this from someone and we don't know who it is, you don't think that's hearsay?
There's no hearsay in this report.
Yes, sir.
Objection. Are we asking for legal opinions now from this witness?
He's given it, I just asked him if there was hearsay. He said there's absolutely none, and he's been qualified as an expert on this field.
I think the objection is to the use of the word hearsay. You may want to rephrase it so that it doesn't have a legal connotation as such as a third person, Ms. Wilson.
There is there not? Numerous times in this report that information is attributed to someone or someone's, plural, without attribution as to who that individual is.
People are not directly named in the report.
If you heard my objection earlier that the highest and best evidence are the records behind this. What does Sachs keep in the way of audio tapes of interviews, notes of interviews, summations of interviews written by the people who are sitting right there in the room doing interviews? What do you have that backs that up?
We don't take transcription or videos of these interviews. We take notes of these interviews based on planned and prepared questions that are related to the specific body of evidence that the system has provided to us.
And where would those notes of responses to those planned questions be filed?
Those are work products of the reviewers. We do not maintain it. We do over 2,000 of these a year.
So you do not have any records behind this report at Sachs that could allow you to tell where any particular statement came from or who said it?
We have records. We have all this evidence that we asked of them. And if I may, no individual person we can reference without name in that report was a sole determinant of any conclusion bias. No one is a sole determinant. When somebody says something in and we reference it, it is to give an example, but the body of evidence that we depend on is that which is documented by the system. This body of evidence is where we go to. If somebody just says it, and we can't find anybody or anything or anywhere actual evidence to support the claim, it's not in the report. It has to be backed up by documented evidence. This is the evidence we maintain, because it is documented evidence produced by the system for this review.
Okay. If I understand you correctly, as far as the interviews go, you do not have any notes or recordings to back those up at SACS, correct?
We do not maintain those.
So as far as the interview process goes, and whatever this board reads, the state board reads in this report regarding what people said, SACS doesn't have anything except what's on the report itself to back that up, correct?
Well, we have the interviewees. These are the people who are interviewed. It's attributed to this group.
No, I'm not talking about attributing it to a group, I'm talking about attributing it to an individual. You don't have any records at SACS.
We don't include those in the report.
But you don't have them, you said. You don't have interview notes at SACS to back up that report.
The team members have. We
Objection,
don't.
ask and answer.
We don't.
Hold on,
file.
Doctor. I believe it may have been asked, but I think he was just following up on another question. So
And I think he said they don't file. In 2005, SACS began a process regarding accreditation on the campus system. Did not?
I'm not
That
sure.
culminated in 2007.
Are you referencing district accreditation?
Yes, sir.
They were accredited before then, but they moved into our district model in
Okay.
2000, I believe in 2007.
They've been previously accredited, correct? Under a different model.
Individual schools.
Right. All by individual schools. But in 2007, SACS, after a 2-year process, fully accredited the system.
Correct.
And it remained accredited without, until, what, the spring of 11 when it got put on advisement?
Possibly. I mean, the problems that we started to work with around the latter part of 2011. The final decision was in 2011.
Okay.
But the problems reemerged in 2009.
If these problems date back a decade, how is it that in 2007, this board, this system, as a system, was fully accredited?
As I stated in my earlier testimony, there was a 2-year period during the 10 years where they were fully accredited, and there were no identified issues relative to governance. Those were the 2 years.
Okay. So there was a period in there from 2007 through 2009 that there were no identified issues of governance and leadership.
That we were concerned with now.
Okay. And in the next 4 years, they go from accreditation to advisement to probation, correct?
Correct.
So when you talk about in that report, things going back a decade and so forth, in 2007, whatever they were, either weren't there or didn't concern you. Correct?
Correct.
Give me just a second. Ms. Hackemeyer, back with you. Thank you, Dr. Elgar.
Thank you. Sir.
Ms. Hackemeyer?
Just one evidentiary matter, exhibits 18 and 19, which are the SAC standards for school systems and the policies and procedures for accreditation. I would like to move into evidence.
Mr. Wilson, I understand you didn't have an objection to 18 to 19, correct?
No, sir, I do not. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Nothing further?
I have no further questions for Dr. Elgar. Thank you.
Dr. Elgar, hold on 1 minute and make sure. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson.
No, sir, I was just going to thank Dr. Elgar.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, well, hold on. I'm not sure if any of the board members have any questions for you, Madam Chair.
I'll open it up for questions from the board. Dr. Murray?
Dr. Elgar, the statute says that we can suspend or recommend suspension if the level of accreditation immediately preceding loss of accreditation for school board governance related reasons. Now, what level are they on now?
Probation,
And when did they get put on probation?
December 2012.
Okay, now, I'm having a little conflict because I thought you said they theoretically could have a year to a year and a half to get off probation.
They have until
Is that a conflict with the law or no?
No, it's an accreditation process. They have until December of this year, 2013, to address the probation issues.
But you could go ahead and make a decision now, even though they have a year.
It would be irregular for us to make a decision between now and December. We would keep them on probation.
Excuse me, I keep interrupting. I mean, we could make a decision now.
Yes. There are two separate processes here. There's our accreditation process, which, as it's outlined, no matter what decisions are made here, we move forward with that process.
Other questions?
Dr. Elgar, thank you for being with us today. Mr. Wilson, he made a relevant point, and you've mentioned 10 years numerous times, and that actually he made the point several times in his opening statement and review that the board we have here within the last 2 years is considerably new. You mentioned several times in your statements, and I want to get your opinion, the governance issues that we have. Do you feel that they have made significant progress towards fixing them over the last 2 years? Well, I see we've got one member 2009, new second term, new 2012. We've got various 2008. So the members that we have really go back to 2008, but again, the majority are new within the last 2 years or so. Do you see this more as a cultural issue, governance issue, and not going back, say, if this board were to take into consideration really the last 2 years or so, and much of the evidence that's been placed before us by Ms. Hackemeyer dates back to, number one is 7/28/2010. Do you see, in your opinion, this governance issue making significant changes for the better towards the issues of good governance? Do you see a lot of change in the last 2 to 3 years to give you confidence that that's happening?
Since the 2010 date up until December 2012, we saw an acceleration of problems related to governance, not an improvement of problems.
Thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Elgar? Mr. Wright?
Do you attach any significance to Mr. Wilson's point that there are no notes available as these entities that you attach any significance to that?
I think, point of clarification, we don't maintain the notes as an association. team members have the notes, and they use them to compile the report. But we don't maintain them. I mean, we just physically can't maintain that volume of notes. They have them, and they use those notes to draft the report. We just don't maintain as an
You
organization.
attach any significance to the fact that you don't maintain.
No, because we go through a lot of review internally to make sure that the conclusions reached by the team are valid. We want to cooperate with other bodies of evidence that we have documented. So it isn't just that the team writes the report and we go forward. Actually, there is, and that's why it took, in this case, it took almost 2 months for us to finish this report, because we pushed the team and ourselves to make sure everything in that, the conclusions reached, are valid. And we looked for videos. If somebody, people told us the situation regarding X, we wanted to find evidence to support it beyond just an interview. But we came into that whole review process with a pretty significant picture already painted, because we reviewed videos of board meetings. We looked at minutes. We looked at their policies before we ever got to the interviews. So it took us 2 months to finalize this document, to make sure the observations the team made on site were valid, reliable, and could be supported by other documentation.
Dr. Elgart, in the time period after you place a system on advisement and or probation, is there usually any ongoing dialogue, written or otherwise, that occurs between SACS and the school system? Is that typical?
Yes.
And was there, in the case of DeKalb County, ongoing dialogue to straighten out the problem, or address the issue?
Until last Friday for the December notification, and I met with them and delivered. We met in a room and actually handed them the report, went through the report and letter. From that point until I received a call from the senior staff member last Friday, there was no engagement between the system and us.
So there was, let me make sure I understand. There's no engagement between the time when they were notified they were placed on probation and until the most recent contact?
And then I met with the new superintendent on Tuesday, and he provided me with the beginnings of a plan to address the required actions on Tuesday.
But typically, when you place a board on, or you place a system on some sort of accreditation watch, they do dialogue with you to try to.
Correct. We have 40 offices across the country, and our state offices normally are the follow-up, and they provide any technical assistance support that a school or system needs to address the accreditation issues that are identified.
So am I correct to say that SACS is willing to work with a system that wants to work with them?
Absolutely. It's part of our responsibility.
Thank you.
So they did not request your help? Your help this group, didn't have any contact?
There was no communication directly between the system officially in my office or my state office until last Friday. But it's their responsibility, and they clearly now appear to be starting to create the plan to move forward and address these actions.
Other questions?
I have a question. I just want to clarify the new board members and when they were on. Now, started January 2013. Prior to that, January 2011, there were how many new board members? 2. So those 2 new board members in January 2011, in effect, have been there almost 2 years. This report is dated October 2012.
Correct.
So nearly 2 years. So those 2 board members, I consider new board members January 2013. Those are experienced board members. They've been there almost 2 years. I just wanted to clarify that. That's correct? Thank you.
Dr. Elgart is not under subpoena, but I would like to ask that he be excused at this time.
No objection.
Dr. Elgart, you're excused.
At this point, we'll take a, looks like 13-minute break. We'll start back at 10:30.
Oh, I'm sorry.